And it is time that I quickly introduce the next speaker, and it is a very important topic as such. So suicide prevention is everybody's business. We cannot single out the victim, or we cannot say this is the only reason why he died. It can be the environment, it can be the friends, it can be the kind of lack of maturity that he has got. So, in my opinion, of course, if a person commits suicide, there has to be a lot of stakeholders who can or need to take responsibility. So that is the next topic, which is very interesting. Let me quickly introduce Mr. Nelson Vinod Moses. He is a journalist by profession, and he's a award-winning mental health journalist. A lot of his articles have featured in magazines like Fortune, Forbes, Times of India, Huntington Post, etc. And he has founded the Suicide Prevention India Foundation. And there could be a reason why, because he lost his best friend to suicide, and that has prompted him to start this organization, Suicide Prevention India Foundation. So he has built it up, and he has the leverage of the World Health Organization recommended suicide prevention strategy called the Gatekeeper program, in which he has opted. So I quickly hand over the session to Mr. Nelson Vinod Moses to talk to us about how suicide prevention is everybody's business.
Thank you very much. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a layperson who got interested in suicide prevention because I lost my best friend to suicide. And the point being that you don't have to be a doctor, you don't have to be a mental health professional to get into suicide prevention. In fact, the World Health Organization talks about suicide prevention being everybody's business. That's exactly what I'm going to be talking about today. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. So I think everybody knows the statistics. The latest National Crime Records Bureau states that there's been a slight increase in the number of suicides. I think the latest numbers are 139,000, if I'm not mistaken. But the whole point being that the actual numbers could be much more. The World Health Organization reported numbers of 215,000. A report in the Lancet from the Global Burden Disease Study, I think, reported as 2.3 lakh. So we have a large number of suicides. We also have a rate of suicide which is bigger than the global average, right? And what we have to realize is that we don't have enough mental health professionals in the country. We don't have enough suicide crisis helplines. We don't have enough mental hospitals with beds. So what happens? In a 2014 report from the World Health Organization, which is Preventing Suicide or Global Imperative, it talks about many recommendations for preventing suicide. And one of them is community-based interventions. And the one that we are focused on is, first of all, we believe that in a country where we don't have the personnel or the infrastructure or a strategy, we don't have a suicide prevention policy, it is going to be up to the community to step in and fill this gap, right? So 8 out of 10 individuals who are feeling suicidal will give out verbal, non-verbal, or written signs. Most of the time, they are not going to call a mental health professional or a suicide crisis helpline or visit a general physician and talk about this. These signs could be visible to a family member. It could be visible to a colleague. It is visible to a friend. And because you're not trained to pick up the signs, most of the time you won't pick it up. So constantly, I keep hearing that I spent the whole day with my friend, and my friend went home and died by suicide. I had no clue. My daughter, she was with us. Had a meal, spent the evening. She went to a room and died by suicide. So this is a common occurrence. So what are we saying? Number one, first of all, suicide is the most preventable form of death. And suicide is preventable by you and me in the absence of the mental health infrastructure or mental health professionals. All we need is a little bit of training to be able to pick up these signs and to be able to have a conversation with the person who's emotionally distressed, potentially suicidal, to be able to listen to them with care and compassion, to be able to let them know that their feelings are valid and what they're going through is something that is valid, and to be empathetic be non-judgmental, and to provide them with hope, and to let them know that their life is important and worth living. And then once you build a bond with the person, then you can move ahead and persuade them perhaps to meet with a mental health professional so that they can get the help that they need, right? So what are we saying? We are saying in a country, whether it's rural areas or it's urban areas, whether you're young or whether you're old or you're middle-aged, the point being that we are all in a situation, especially in a situation where we have COVID, right? We are caught up in our own homes. We may be meeting very few people. I, uh, Here's what I'm hearing, right? I mean, um, a multinational company got in touch with us, and they told us that they're tracking suicides in their company. And the first 6 months of 2020, the number of suicides has already surpassed that of 2019. And there are already many reports which are talking about an increase in stress, anxiety, depression, isolation, loneliness, abuse, increased alcohol and drug use, uh, domestic violence, and loss of jobs. So a lot is happening. So in a situation like this, where first of all, suicide, I think there, I just saw that Dr. Garcia had presented. I'm sure that he mentioned that suicide, the reasons for it is multifactorial, it's multidimensional, it's quite complex. But at the same time, there are factors which are beyond us, which are structural, systemic issues that are weighing down on society and therefore weighing down on the individual, which can be political, which is social, which is cultural, which is economic, which is related to caste or gender or sexuality. There are many of these factors that are weighing down on individuals, but at the same time, there are factors that can help an individual, or there are three ways that suicide can be prevented. Um, a lot of the onus is put on the self. If you hear a lot of conversations, it's said the person should step in, get help. The person should step in, take care of themselves. The person should step in, maybe get hospitalized if needed, or get on medication if needed. And a lot of this is pointed out to saying suicide and mental illness are so closely connected. Well, the fact is about 50 to 60% of suicides have an underlying mental health issue, which is either undiagnosed and untreated. But the fact is that there are many factors at play. And so when somebody is feeling suicidal, there are three things that usually happen to them. They're feeling helpless because they think there is no help. They're feeling hopeless because they think there is no hope. And they're feeling worthless. They think they're a burden, and that they should not go on living. So what our organization does is using the community-based intervention. It's called Gatekeeper Training. Gatekeepers are essentially trained to recognize these signs of suicide. They're trained to have a conversation with the person who's suicidal, and then to provide emotional support, and to be able to persuade the person to get help from a mental health professional. Now, is the mental health professional or mental health related interventions the only thing that is required? No, it's not. There are many ways to deal with it, but we are talking about maybe somebody who's acutely distressed or suicidal, and perhaps at that point in time, a meeting with a therapist or meeting with a psychiatrist could provide them immediate relief that they can get. So coming back to what we do, so we believe that suicide is preventable, and suicide is preventable by the community, whoever is in close contact with the person. So in my case, I lost my best friend to suicide. 2 days before he died, he gave me a call and he said that he needed help. This was a long time back, nearly 20 years back. At that point in time, the OPD at Nimhans was open on a Saturday. And he called me, 2 days before, and I said, I'll pick you up and I will take you there. But before I could take him there, he'd passed on. So what I'm saying is, since 8 or 10 suicidal individuals will give you signs, you are in a position to make an intervention. And the feeling of suicide is such a heavy feeling, the psychic distress that you're feeling, that suicidality will not last for a long period of time. You may suffer from ideation. You may start to plan, but when you move into an autopilot stage and saying, I want to go ahead with this, the period that happens can be within 5 minutes or a few hours, or within 24 to 48 hours. But during this time, Signs that you can pick up are, if the person is feeling, look for anything which is out of the ordinary, right? The physical appearance, the person, acting differently. Earlier, if they were talking about the pain and the suffering that they were going through, they may suddenly stop talking about the pain and the suffering that they're going through, right? Or they may be having disturbed sleep, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, consuming alcohol or drugs, eating too much, eating too little, suddenly becoming spiritual or losing interest in religion, talking about death in a way, making their will, giving away prized possessions. There are many signs related to this. There are severe behavioral signs that you can pick up. These are definitely related to a difficulty in sleeping. A person not being able to keep calm even for a few seconds, like they're literally jumping out of their skin. Look out for these signs, and the first thing that you would do is to approach the person and just ask them, how are they doing? Is there anything on their mind? Would they want to talk? Right now, some individuals give you direct answers. Some of them will talk to you about this indirectly. So it could be anything from saying, I feel like sleeping and never waking up. I think I'm a burden. I feel like I'm a loser. Watch out for conversations which are filled with self-loathing, filled with saying, I'm in pain, I wish the pain would go away. Or saying that, if this thing has not happened, and because it's not happened, I don't think I can carry on. Or this loss of hope completely, a loss of interest in activities that they used to have interest in, giving up on things that they were earlier concerned with. So, or directly saying, is there a painless way to end this? I want to die, right? So when this happens, the most important thing is to listen, and listen completely, and to be able to communicate to the person that you're actually listening, and by validating their feelings, their emotions, and their current life situation. They may be telling you something. To you it might appear trivial, or it might be a situation that you faced before and you were able to overcome it, but the point is that you've got to listen to it. So once that happens, you're listening to them, and then you're validating their feelings and emotions, and you respond to how you're feeling right now, and I understand you're feeling this right now. And you know and ask open-ended questions. It must be really difficult being in this position. I see that you're in a great deal of pain. Tell me more about it. And once they feel like they're vented everything that they have to vent, and once you let them know that, hey, listen, I care about you, I want you to live, your life is important, you are important to me, and then tell them, would you let me help you? So it's got to be a collaborative approach. The person who, in whatever state they are, still has the right to make the decision, and you've got to allow them to say that, you've trusted me enough to open up to me, could you please trust me enough that I can let you help you, and persuading them to go to a mental health professional. The best thing is to physically take them to a mental health professional. The second best thing is to fix an appointment for them and following up that they've gone to a mental health professional. The third best way is to get a promise that they will go to a mental health professional and to follow up. Also remember that you don't have to be the only one who's doing it. Mobilize support. In a lot of cases, you'll find that there is a friend, there is one neighbor, especially now when people are stuck in their homes. Maybe you can't go there, but you can ask, is there anybody else in your apartment complex that you can talk to? Is there a family member? Maybe the parents won't get involved. Maybe there's a brother or a sister. And then mobilize support. Also make a safety plan for them and saying, are you in a situation, are you safe right now? And if they're very distressed, then you might need to be there with them, and put them on suicide watch up until the time that you can get the help that they need, right? So gatekeeper training, and this is something that, like I said, with 1 hour of this training, you will be able to pick up signs, you will be able to provide the emotional support, and you will be able to help them. And that we've trained well over 2,500 gatekeepers, and a lot of them have are making these interventions or providing support. So I would urge you, I've left my email ID behind. So anybody who wants to do this program, the online training is 1 hour. We also do webinars, which are 2 hours. I'm ready to take questions. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. That was really insightful, Nelson. I personally, when you said that suicide is the most preventive form of death, that makes a lot of sense, right? It can be done by everyone, and as you said, it's a community approach. With a country like India, the kind of population that we have, the lack of mental professionals, obviously, that makes a lot of sense for us to be connected with people, and of course, do our part in helping them. Yeah, and the important point is, you talked about 50 to 60%, because there could be stats thereabouts. 50 to 60% of suicides are people who suffer from mental illness who have not been diagnosed. That's a very, very dangerous proposition, right? Now we believe it's a lack of self-confidence that happens in those 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But what about those people who have that mental illness, probably not being diagnosed, they're not being counseled to or advised to? So those are some staggering stats. But as we know, Rome is not built in a day. This is something that we need to take ownership for, each and every one of us.
Yes, absolutely. So what I want to say is that up until if you're talking about 1.3, 1.4 lakh suicides, for every suicide there are 25 people who will make an attempt to die. So multiply 25 by 1.3 to 1.4 lakh and you get a few millions. And for every suicide there are 100 people actively thinking about it, suffering a great deal. So we have more millions, right? So multiply that into 100 and it becomes it's what, 140 million. And then you think about it saying, if each individual, all of us know about 50 to 100 people, there is somebody in your inner or outer circle at this very moment in time who's actively thinking about suicide. So sometimes we wake up when it happens to us. A lot of the gatekeepers who sign up for our training are actually survivors of suicide loss, or perhaps they're suicide survivors themselves. And that's no reason to be doing it at that point in time. But the thing is, we need to realize that suicide has no reset button. Once it happens, there is no going back. There is also hope. So 9 out of 10 suicide survivors will not go on to die by suicide. What it means is that suicidality is a short-lived crisis. And at that point in time, if anybody can offer help in the form of listening, empathy, concern, support, and just let them know that there is hope, the person will be able to avert that crisis. And when you support that with behavioral care, if it's required, they have chances of perhaps not going back to suicide ideation or feeling suicidal, right? So, and it's not, I also want to make sure that I want to say that suicide is not just about mental health. There is many factors related, whether they're biological, cultural, political, environmental, precipitating factors like bereavement, loss of a job, COVID is one situation. So there are many, the lockdown. So there are many factors that come into play. 1 or 2 factors is easier to deal with, but it's only when many factors come together within a short period of time that the person is unable to deal with it. But again, there are protective factors. So just like you have risk factors include, alcohol, drug abuse, having lost a loved one to suicide, being a suicide survivor yourself, being diagnosed with a terminal or a chronic illness, losing a job, divorce, being in debt, the death of a loved one. So there are many risk factors, and there are many at-risk communities. Like young people in India are dying more by suicide than other parts of the world. The elderly are at risk. The LGBT community, especially when somebody's coming out, are at risk. Housewives, we have 2 housewife suicides for every farmer suicide. So young women especially are at high risk. So you have risk factors, you have warning signs, and you have protective factors. Protective factors acts as a counterweight and acts as a barrier to suicide. So protective factors are something which are, which we have, or something which can be cultivated. So emotional resilience, the building of life skills, having a purpose or meaning in life, having somebody to look after, like your parents or a son or a daughter, or your husband or a wife, or even pets, for that matter. A lot of them, will not die by suicide because they have something, someone or something to look after. Social connectedness is your biggest barrier to suicide. Social connectedness is the ability to have friends and family who will be there for you no matter what. And I'm not just talking about unconditional love. I'm pointing out to something called unconditional positive regard, which I think is more important than just having unconditional love. Your parents might give you unconditional love, but in a lot of cases where, where there is completed suicide, it's because of shame, because of guilt, related to aspects that you're unable to even talk to your parents or your closest friend about. But at those times, if you were to talk to your therapist about it, it could be helpful. So let's say porn addiction, gambling addiction, being fired from your job. There are many factors which individuals are unwilling to talk about to closest friends and family, right? So having unconditional positive regard is to say, if something were to happen to you which was unethical, immoral, or even illegal, the person, either a friend or a family member or a colleague or whoever it is, will give you unconditional, will view you positively regardless of the condition. We understand unconditional love, which is to say, my love is not based on conditions, but unconditional positive regard is also very important. So you need to ask yourself, if tomorrow, I found out that pictures that I shared are now going to be circulated, is there someone that I can talk to? If I was fired from my job for, fraudulent financial transactions, is there somebody that I can talk to? If I have a diagnosis of HIV/AIDS, is there someone that I can talk to? There are many factors which fill us with shame, but it's important that we find a friend. So that's what I mean by saying the counter weight or the barriers to suicide are protective factors. It's important that we develop them, and if we don't have them, it's just like having money in the bank that you start saving from a young age, so that when you actually come to a state of retirement or when you need it, that you have money in the bank. So you can build these protective factors and ensure that when there's a time of crisis, that you're able to deal with it.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks so much for that. Now, one question that I have here from one of the participants here: why are so many suicides even amongst the educated fraternity?
So it's very important to understand that there is no discrimination whether you're rich or you're poor, whether you're highly educated or not so educated. The National Crime Records Bureau will say that the bulk of the suicides are happening, 12th standard, those who study till 12th standard or below. We have to look at the data, but the point is that suicide really doesn't discriminate, and the reason why the suicides are happening over there may be more to do with like poverty, right, or the lack of a safety net when required, migrants going back. So why are there more suicides among the educated people? I mean, there are suicides everywhere. We think, and this is a myth, that recently we had a survivor of suicide loss. She was a chartered accountant. She lost a cousin brother who was, a PhD, somebody who did really well in terms of his career. He was married. He had a 2-year-old, and he was in his mid-30s, and he died by suicide, and nobody saw it coming. So first, we have to understand why it happens before we understand how we can prevent it. And I mentioned some of the factors. It can be related to a mental illness, but I'm not saying that there is a singular cause, but there are these different factors that come together that eventually leads to the death of a person. So it can be anything from, like I said, a chronic or a terminal illness. So it's very important that we understand each and every aspect. We also need to understand what are called precipitating factors. So we need to know that when you're moving from college to a job, there's extra pressure. You're getting married. If you've gotten married, you're pregnant, post-pregnancy, this postpartum. Men in their 40s globally, the highest rate of suicide among men is among middle-aged men. Why does it happen? We need to understand that. Same with women, younger women between 18 to 29, and again, post that are at a risk of dying by suicide. So it doesn't mean that just because, you have a graduation or a post-graduation or a PhD that you're at a lower risk. It's important that having understood that you have a problem and the ability to seek help, because of the stigma and the taboo associated with feeling suicidal. I just did a talk in the morning. There's a high rate of suicide among the doctor fraternity than the rest of the population, almost 2.5 times more. And the reason over there is, they have access to lethal means. They know how to use lethal means. They also, do not, because they see themselves as caregivers, they don't seek care. And the doctor who was part of the panel also mentioned that they fear that if they went out and sought help, that they would be looked down upon, or the careers, could get jeopardized. So there are a number of reasons. I've listed more of them. I want to leave my email ID again over here, and anybody who wants to do the Gatekeeper training can reach out and get in touch with me. Thank you very much. I think that is my time. And I thank Wow Clinic for organizing this. I thank all of you for listening to me. I want to leave you with a message saying suicide is preventable, and it is preventable by you and me. It's just like doing, knowing what to do if the person has a cut, applying an antiseptic, putting a bandage, and then taking them to a doctor if required. It's the same thing as that. And I see that the role of community in preventing suicides is going to be presented by Dr. K.V. Kishore Kumar. Fantastic. This is what we need. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. And suicide is preventable. Suicide prevention is everyone's business, and all of us together can prevent suicide. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. So the email address for everyone is info@spif.in. I learned a lot in this quick speech, that reminds me of that story, right? So what happens after a huge wave that comes to the shore, it brings hundreds and thousands of starfish to the shore in a beach. And a small boy was trying to, throw whatever starfish that he can, because for a fact that in a few minutes, they might lose their life. So the old man was asking, so do you think that you'll be able to throw all of them? There was so much, hundreds and thousands. But the boy said that, yeah, I don't know about them, but this particular starfish he picked up, he threw it in the water and he saved, right? So
absolutely,
that is the kind of responsibility. I mean, that's the sense that I got. Everybody in the society that we've got. So it's, with a country with so much of population, it is important, that imperative that we take responsibility of our friends and our people where we can make the difference in their life. So that's well said, well articulated. Thanks so much, Nelson, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and all the very best. Thank you.